This video is sponsored by Shebop. Shebop is a woman-owned sex toy boutique for everybody, specializing in body-safe products and education. Visit sheboptheshop.com to shop online or take classes.
It is interesting, James, that you brought up though, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier off camera, the whole idea of daddy culture within the queer community. Um, and it sounds to me, please correct me if I'm wrong, like there's an element of that, and I hope you can talk about this, that almost replaces the nurture, the caring, the love that some people didn't receive from their biological parents or parents whose house they grew up in, that the queer community in a daddy culture can provide. Is that something that I'm hearing correctly?
Yeah, and providing is a unique way of putting it, but in some situations, dad son culture, can look a lot like, a 50-year-old cisgender gay man and his 25-year-old submissive partner who does everything that daddy says in public or just in bed, or there's a lot of kink attached to that. In some situations that looks a lot like, you got older men who are of an older generation and gay identified or queer identified and have more access to wealth, and they enjoy providing for younger gay men in particular. And I'm sorry to make this male centric, because this is the same for trans folks, and I know that a lot of this carries over into heterosexual relationships as well. But I think I think the biggest thing about that is, like, I don't want to shame anybody for what they got going on, whatever their kink is or whatever their relationship dynamic looks like. But like we just talked about earlier, establishing boundaries is really important. Communicating is very important. Hey, if you want to be the dad that sexually bosses around your partner, great. Both consent to that. Negotiate that and figure out what that is. But I think it's also really important to understand how that culture is built. And at least for me, I wanted to think about the fact that, I had two fathers in my life. One of them was very homophobic. The other was not existent. And, I can still talk to them both right now, but I haven't seen either one of them in over 10 years. And not that I hate them. I just, the things I really needed from a father figure, I never really got. And now that I'm 41 years old, and not that I'm old, but it's in gay, I'm a daddy at this point in my life. I got salt and pepper coming in. I'm in a higher income bracket. I have to be really careful about what that looks like. It's like, hey, if you want to fuck, that's great, but I'm not going to pay your bills, and you're not moving in with me rent free. And and that's also a relationship dynamic we should probably discuss. And not to bring it into a kink thing, but as far as parenting is concerned, I just really want to make sure that I'm super communicative with my partner about how we raise our kid, and super communicative with other folks that live our particular lifestyle about how important it is to just think about how toxic some of that can be, and also how rewarding that could be if we have open communication and clear boundaries.
Well, it sounds to me like there's some common elements, particularly, AJ, with the way that you're raising your child, and Reba with the way that you're raising yours. I think we all experience this. We accept as normal however we grow up. We don't question anything if it's just presented as, yes, this is how you live. And then you grow up, you experience other things, and you're like, oh, not everything is like this. And James, it almost sounds like in the culture you're describing, there's an opportunity to shift away from, let's say, normalized hatred into something else.
Mm-hmm. Very true. But it's something I just want to note, and I'm just going to be responsible and say it right now. We also, I think, as a cis gay man, I just try to reiterate that we're still men. So, the patriarchy, even though we're not straight, we still have male privilege, and there's a lot of things that spill over into gay culture that can be inherently misogynistic and transphobic. And so a lot of times I just really try to make sure that we're not forgetting about the mothers, and we're not and forgetting about the parents who don't identify as either gender. And just I think all things can exist. You know, the gay culture isn't a monolith. You know, it's just, that's why I prefer queer, because it's questioning, it's ambiguous, it's what I want to make of it. And I think that's a very safe place to anchor. And just talking about this dad-son dynamic, not knocking anybody what they do, but two consenting adults should have a really firm conversation about what they want, what their boundaries are, and how we're interacting with each other and the people around us too. I think it's critical.
Mm-hmm. James, I have a question regarding all that you just said. So I was relating to you on this topic because I too enjoy the daddy dynamic in a sexual way. And I will be the first to tell you it's because I didn't have a dad growing up and didn't get what I needed. Sort of exactly what you were saying. And I'm wondering if this is what you're saying. Are you saying, because I think this is what I observe, that it's a lot more common in the queer community and queer culture, and it almost sounded like you were saying like, well, now that I'm at a certain age, I just sort of graduated and inherited that role. Whereas like that wouldn't happen, I don't feel like, in a heteronormative situation. Do you feel like in the queer community, it's just like, you're a daddy now, congratulations. Like you
yes.
there.
Yes.
And you might not necessarily want that. You might be like, cool, I'm in it. But do you feel like that's a thing?
Yes. If my therapist gets to watch, I'm going to send this to my therapist, but I call them the lost boys, you know? And it's just, and look, you know, before I met my partner, I've been a relationship anarchist. I can't have one sex partner, you know. Even before we got engaged, it's like, look, babe, you're not going to be the last person I sleep with. We can talk about that. But I'd have, you know, a couple folks, couple of different types of men that I slept with. And all of a sudden I'm like, they're calling me when they're distraught, you know. Hey, dad, I need $60. My ex-boyfriend literally asked me for $200 the other day. And we've been broken up for 3 years. And I'm like, I'm not your daddy. Call your dad. Call your father. I'll be your daddy, but I won't be your father. But there's some safety there, you know. Not just safety in that, but sometimes even like something AJ mentioned earlier about cuddling. I mean, I can't tell you how many younger men I've just held. Even my partner, just holding them, like cradling them, and how safe they feel because they never had that touch. Not even in a sexual way, just the safety of having someone older than them, or someone more, or even more secure. Just I don't know how to best explain that, but a lot of that is missing for a lot of us. And I'm kind of a switch. I love it when in the middle of the night, we'll just flip over, my partner and just inherently puts his arm around me, and I'm like, oh, you know, that comfort is missing for me in particular. I never really had that growing up. But I just think it's important not to confuse what that relationship looks like, because I'm going to go ahead and say it. I've seen it where you've got people who are much older, and you've got younger kids who are 17, 16, or even just 18, and they're on drugs. You know, you've got older folks giving them drugs or giving them money in exchange for sex, and how people negotiate that is their business. But I just don't think that's very healthy. And but that's my opinion. And I just think there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that as well.
Yeah, God, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's like a thing that I feel bad for dads, because there are not a lot of like good dad role models. Like so much of what we hear about dads are like dads who abandon their kids, or dads who are like awful to their children. And so like, of course that's going to come up then in daddy culture, because the daddy role is based on fathers and patriarchy and masculinity tropes, which are often toxic. And so people do misuse that role because they know that people are seeking that security from a person who's older or more financially stable or whatever. And people will absolutely, of all sexual orientations, take advantage of that. And that's unfortunate.